Shalom, guys. Welcome back to another episode here at Just Shop Youth Ministries with Casa Israel Yarah. We're back and we're going to start a new book, the book of Bamidbar. I wasn't able to record last week. My apologies. Got a little sick, a little throat, but I'm good. I'm back and we're going to get into the book of Numbers, the book of Bamidbar, like I said, and we're going to continue restructuring the way we think, the way we see the Bible. And I hope that with the videos, they are of help and that they help us understand God and understand the Bible and understand what is His desire. Because, like I always say, if people of faith, and especially people of faith in the Bible itself, the whole book, we have to redefine, and reestablish who do we have faith in, and if our faith is in the God of the Bible, then what is He faithful to, right? Because He is faithful to those who obey Him and that represent Him and exalt Him above everything and exalt what He calls holy and set apart. And it's something that is perpetuated through Genesis and the book of Revelation and so on, right? And so, what does God desire? And that's what we're trying to seek. That's what we're trying to look forward to learn. And so, I hope that I'm doing a good job, at least helping you go in the right direction, in the best direction, right? Because we have grown with religious ideologies, theologies, and so we need to learn how to dig through all these things and find God's will and God's desire. So let's get started with this Torah portion. So this week we're going to start, like I said, with the book of Bamidbar, right? And so Bamidbar starts in the book of Numbers, which is Numbers 1, verse 1 through Numbers 4, verse 20. And the Haftorah, or the prophet's portion, is Hosea chapter 1, verse 10 through Hosea chapter 2, verse 20. And the Brit Hadashah, or the New Testament portion, is Romans 9, verse 22 to 33. So the English name Numbers derives from the fact that in this book, the Israelites are counted or numbered on several occasions, chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, and chapter 26. So is a theme that is very vivid in this book. That's why in the English in Greek is Numbers. And so Leviticus ends with Yehovah instructing his people to count their flocks for their tithes purposes, while Numbers begins with Yehovah as the ultimate good shepherd, or in Hebrew, Yehovah Rohe, counting the Israelites themselves, who are the sheep of his pasture. And so it's very interesting, right? Because last year or 2 years ago, I presented how the Israelites are counted militarily, right? So they have been given the structure of the tabernacle, the Torah, and how they're going to move in the tabernacle, how they're going to preserve and maintain and consecrate the tabernacle and themselves and the community. And so now they're prepared to be organized militarily with the younger men. That way, that when they march to the promised land, they are organized and in synchronization with the priests and the community. Okay, and so, but here we're going to look at it as God's great shepherd, right? Counting his flock in the desert, right? It is a concept that I have loved, right? Because when God says he will take us into green pastures, Jonathan, my good friend, taught me that it not necessarily means that you're going to have green mountains full of grass. The green pasture is a representation of a desert land that has very small patches of grass. And the pastor, as he guides the sheep in the desert, guides them to find that necessary food that they need to move on to that next step. The fact that this counting took place in the wilderness proves that it was not for political or national economic reasons, but was in fulfillment of Jehovah's Torah instructions, right? So they were obeying God each step of the way, getting what they needed. They were learning to understand that they only needed to focus on what they needed, not what they desired. And so each Israelite was to give a half shekel of silver towards the maintenance of the tabernacle. The shekels then counted and will give the exact number of Israelites, okay? So we see that in Exodus 30. Now, Bamidbar, the Hebrew name Bamidbar meaning in the wilderness, originates from the fact that this book chronicles Israel's wanderings in the wilderness. The book of Exodus, on the other hand, records the deliverance of Israel from Egypt, its establishment as a nation, its covenantal relationship with Yahweh or Yehovah, and the construction of the tabernacle, the Mishkan, which was the symbol of Yehovah, God dwelling or tabernacling in the midst of his chosen people. The book of Leviticus deals with the inner workings of the tabernacle and the mechanics of how sinful man can maintain a right spiritual relationship with a righteous Elohim. This was accomplished through the agency of the Levitical priesthood that would function within the tabernacle as human intermediaries between man and his creator. This is a summary of what we have been talking about, and I hope that I've done a good job helping you at least start to dig through this book of Leviticus, which is very important. It doesn't matter if you are a Christian and you have accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior. The point that you are becoming saved and are becoming restored through Jesus, it means that you have to go back and you have to learn how to maintain yourself and consecrate yourself the same way he did, okay? So the book of Leviticus teaches us that. Psalm 95, verse 1 through 7 say, "Come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout loud to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before him with thanksgiving and extol him with music and song. For the Lord is the greater God," right? The great God, the great King above all gods. "In his hand are the depths of the earth, and the mountain peaks belong to him. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. Come, let us bow and worship. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God, our Elohim, and we are the people of his pasture, the flock under his care. Today, if only you would hear his voice." And so this psalm is encompassing what we have been learning through Genesis and now closing Leviticus and entering the book of Bamidbar. We're understanding that God is the creator. God is the sole representative of humanity. And we have to focus on the worship and the reverence and the obedience and listening to his voice. We're going to be able to imitate him, imitate the deity, and be his image in the world, right? And so Psalm 100 says, "Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture." Now, this focus of Israel understanding that they're sheep, and he is the pastor that is guiding us to those patches of grass that is needed in the desert that will sustain the sheep until they get to their destination, right, is what we need to focus on. Because understanding that we need to follow his voice, understanding that we need to follow him as a pastor, is going to help us reach that which we need and not so much that we desire, okay? Because we are influenced to think that is about what we desire, and we forget that is what we need. It's about what we need. That's what God is trying to teach us. Focus on what you need, because as long as you focus on what you need and you obey me, then your desires will be fulfilled eventually, right? If you obey God in the desert, you will reach the promised land. But before you reach the promised land, you have to follow God's voice. And so, we're going to go back again. Genesis 2, 1 through 3 say, "Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array, but by the seventh day God had finished the work that he had been doing. So on the seventh day he rested from all his work Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, set apart, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Now, verses 16 through 17 say, and the Lord commanded the man, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat from it, you will certainly die. And so it's very interesting because this is the highlight of the book of Genesis, right? And you might say, Alex, what does this have to do with the book of Numbers? And what are you trying to say? So in the Bible, in very academic circles, there is a lot of concepts that are used when you study it, right? There's archetypal concepts, there's motif concepts, and so all these things are used so that we're able to understand the message that is profound and that is vibrant throughout the scriptures, right? And a lot of people say the Bible contradicts itself. In reality, the Bible does not contradict itself. It's trying to communicate something through cultures and through generations of God trying to speak to the humanity and help them go back to their original design. And so here we have two concepts. We have creation, right? How God created everything and put everything into order, and then he rested. And then he gave man his image and his likeness so that he may promote, or so that he may spread this garden that he put in Eden. And so before we get started, let's do the Torah blessing. Baruch Adonai HaMorah, Baruch Adonai HaMorah Leolam Ba'er, Baruch Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam, Asher Bahar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, Benatan Lanu Et Torato, Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah. Bless Adonai who is blessed, bless Adonai who is blessed now and forever. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who has chosen us from among the peoples and given us the Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, giver of the Torah. Amen. So, this week's Torah portion, like I said, starts וידבר יהובה אדוני אל משה במדבר זיני באוהל מועד באחד להולדש השני בשנה השנית לצאתם מארץ Mitzrayim lebor. And in English, it says the following. The Lord spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting in the desert of Sinai on the first day of the second month, the second year after the Israelites came out of Egypt. And he said, take a census of the whole Israelite community by their clans and families, listing every man by name, one by one. And Aaron are to count according to their divisions all the men in Israel who are 20 years old or more and able to serve in the army. One man from each tribe, each of them the head of his family, is to help you. So here is the introduction. They're counting the young man of 20 years old. Remember the concept of military, prepare because they will be marching through the desert, and understand that Israel is not the only nation, and what they have just done, defeating Egypt and dethroning Pharaoh from his dominant throne, and now they have decided to, in the eyes of the world, follow Moses, a man with a staff, but now they have built a tent, and they are going to be marching with the ark as the throne of God, but there's no image in it or on it. And so it's very weird, very different than what other nations are used to. And so they're going to face opposition. So God, above everything, wants them to be prepared and organized because they are the image and representation of God in creation. And so we understand that Genesis starts with the earth was formless and void, right? And then the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the earth, and so in the depths of the sea. And now we understand that from there, God said, let there be light. And so obviously we get to, from that, creation, and then there's a garden that is planted, right? And we have that image. Chaos, the earth was formless and void, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the sea and the earth, and then boom, let there be light. Creation, everything is put into order, right? And obviously we're overly summarizing this to get to the point. We have the garden. Now in the garden, God puts Adam. And there's the Garden of Eden. Adam, the one that is supposed to spread this garden in Eden, right? And the concept is there is a garden in Eden, right? And let's say that Eden is the world, right? The globe, or for some, the flat earth. And so Eden is the world, and then in the world there's a garden. And so God planted this garden in the world, and Adam is meant to spread the garden, right? Make it grow, right? That's the concept that is being put. Now, from there, we jump to Egypt, right? Obviously, we skip Noah, we skip Abraham, right? But we're understanding that because you should have been reading this. Now we're in Egypt, right? And now there's chaos again because Egypt is oppressing. The people of Israel are being oppressed, which are the people of God. And so now from there, they're taken to the mountain. So from chaos, then the Spirit of God and God through Moses brings them to this mountain. And in this mountain, there's a full manifestation of God's presence. And they receive the instructions of how they're going to be God's image in the world, right? And so slowly from Egypt to the mountain is a step of recreating Genesis, right? Because the mountain at Sinai becomes the representation of God's presence in the Garden of Eden. And Moses becomes the representation of Adam, or the high priest, in the garden that maintains the community, maintains God's people. And so he communicates with God. He brings God's word to the people. Okay? So with that, we build the tabernacle. So we have the commandments, we have the tabernacle. Now, the tabernacle becomes the garden itself now, because that is where the holiness is, the presence of God is. And Aaron and his sons and Moses, to an extent, become the image of God to the people. And they become the people, or the image of the people, to God. And so they become this connect between heaven and earth, okay? And so this is what we have been receiving to this point. So we have creation from chaos. God permits order, puts man in control. We go to Egypt, chaos. God puts that chaos into order and puts man in control. And in this case, we have Adam. Now we have Aaron and Moses as the leaders representing God. And so this tabernacle is meant to be the garden in Eden, right? So the people of Israel now have the Garden of Eden, and they have been put the responsibility of spreading this garden to the earth, meaning God's image, God's presence, God's authority is supposed to be represented through Israel. And in their way to the promised land, they will march in order, okay? So they're in the desert, which is very interesting. Again, this concept of chaos, right? In the desert, you can see it two ways. You can see it as a place where there's no fruit, there's no life, there's no order. But it's very interesting because God takes Israel into this place where there's no order, there's chaos. In many cultures is where demons and monsters live, just like they believed everything under the sea, the Leviathan, and all these mythical creatures that they understood that existed. They are encountering the same aspect in the desert. But the teaching behind the desert is that even though that it is empty and it might not have fruit, in there God is restructuring how humanity sees everything. And in this case, how Israel sees everything. Because in the desert, God has given them identity, has given them structure. And as we see, he gives them food. And he gives them life. And so, in this desert, even though to the perception of humanity and men, there's nothing, because they can't control it. That they can control what happens in the desert, but God can control nature, and it's something that I've been talking a little bit with the youth, right? The nature in the desert that is interpreted in many cultures, now God is using it to restructure Israel, right? And the beauty about this concept is that if they wanted to travel in the desert, they had to travel light. So they only needed to travel with what they needed. That's why the tabernacle is supposed to be mobile. And you travel light. You travel what you need. And the provider in the desert is God. And the one that is guiding you is God. And the one that is protecting you is God. And if you leave God's presence, then you're on your own in the desert or in the wilderness. And so, in this desert that can represent chaos, just like in the beginning, just like in Egypt, now in Bamidbar, this desert where there's chaos, now God gives Israel a structure, right? So now they're organized, right? They have the camps, right? As you will read, they're counted. They're militarily positioned to, when God says, stay, and they stop and they build the camp, and they are ordered. They're organized. And when they have to march, they march in a specific order and structure, synchronized, right? And they become the image of God in the world, or in the desert. In the midst of chaos, they bring order. And so you might think they will not survive in the desert, but because they're obeying God's word, God is manifesting grace and favor to them in that desert. So every time they obey, God's image is with them, right? That's why later on Balaam says, how beautiful are your tents, O Jacob, and your dwellings, O Israel, because they were in order and in structure. And so Matthew 12:22, verse 26 to 22-26 say, then they brought him a demon-possessed man. So now we're jumping all the way to the New Testament, okay? It says, they brought to Jesus a demon-possessed man who was blind and mute. And Jesus healed him so that he could both talk and see, right? So this is what Israel has been given, okay? Remember, Israel was in the desert, but they were in Egypt. And now they are given the ability to talk and see. They are given authority. They're given the ability to become a nation that represents and partakes of creation. It says, all the people were astonished and said, could this be the son of David? But when the Pharisees heard this, they said, it is only by Beelzebul, the prince of demons, that this fellow drives out demons. And Jesus, Yeshua, knew their thoughts and said to them, every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. If Satan drives out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then can his kingdom stand? Okay, now, and if I drive out demons by Beelzebul, by whom do your people drive them out? So then, they will be your judges. But if it is by the Spirit of God, then I will drive out demons. Then the kingdom of God has come upon you. Or again, how can anyone enter a strong man's house and carry off his possessions unless he first ties up the strong man? Then he can plunder his house. Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. And so I tell you, every kind of sin and slander can be forgiven, but blasphemy against the Spirit will not be forgiven. Anyone who speaks a word against the Son of Man will be forgiven, but anyone who speaks against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven, either in this age or in the age to come. Make a tree good, and its fruit will be good, or make a tree bad, and its fruit will be bad. For a tree is recognized by its fruits. Why do I use this example? Here is a clear representation of what we're going to learn in the book of Bamidbar. So I explained to you that in the desert, visually, even us in our time, if you think about the desert, you will think that there's nothing there. There's chaos, sandstorms, no life. And in that desert, God prevailed his people. God restored his people. God gave them an identity and made them a strong nation. And what was going to keep them together, united, was their faith, not in themselves, their faith not on what they desire, but faith in God, and that God will provide what they needed to fulfill their purpose. Here, Yeshua, in this example, says he has delivered this man so he can see and talk. And they judge him for giving this man the ability to see and talk, which is a fruit of the kingdom of heaven. And they judge it and they condemn it as a demon-possessed ritual, right? He's healing them with the ability of demons. And he's saying, if I heal on behalf of demons, who are you healing, or whose name are you healing by? Because I am giving people sight and talk. You guys haven't been able to do that. And so Yeshua says, you will know them by their fruits. And it's very interesting because now the people of Israel have been given the opportunity to eat from the tree of life, right? God has given the people of Israel the tree of life in the desert, which is his word. The same tree that was given to Adam and Eve in the garden. So to Adam and Eve, God gave the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. And he said, eat of the tree of life and don't eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because eventually you will die. And then in the mountain, he says, if you obey my words, you will live. But if you disobey, you will eventually die. And in some cases, instantaneously. And here Yeshua is saying, if you make a tree good, its fruit will be good. And if you make a tree bad, its fruit will be bad. Israel has the choice in this desert. Are they going to be good and they're going to maintain themselves organized in the midst of chaos, and they're going to focus on him and his provision and his guidance, or will they divide themselves? Will they reject that which is their source of life, their source of order? So the opening of the book of Bamidbar is very interesting because Israel is in a good position. They're in the midst of a desert that can represent chaos, disorder, and they have become a powerful nation in the midst of this chaos. And they are going to have the ability to fulfill God's promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is taking this manifestation of God's word and manifesting it in the land. So they have Eden amongst them. That tabernacle is a representation of Eden, and they're called to be the image bearers of this garden. Bring this order, bring this holiness, bring this sanctity into the desert and into the land, and then from the land into the world. But the narrative says, will they do it or not? That is the question. And will we learn from their mistakes? Because Israel's opportunity now is obey God's instruction and follow God's structure. But if they don't, division will come, death will come, and chaos will come. And that which they're called to represent in the desert now will consume them. Because if they don't obey God and become his image, then the desert becomes a place of chaos and death. But if they obey, this place of emptiness and void becomes a garden, becomes an Eden, becomes a place in which Balaam himself says, a beautiful place. How beautiful are your dwellings, O Jacob, and your tents, O Israel. So what is the world going to see in the midst of chaos? Are they going to see us ordered, united, or will they see a kingdom that's divided? Because Yeshua himself said that a kingdom divided will not prosper. So let's be with him. Whoever is with him is gathering, but whoever is not with him is scattering. So that's all I got for this week. Let's be that good tree, and let's bear that good fruit, because that's what they're going to recognize us for, our fruits. Have a great week. Like and subscribe, share, like I always say, and Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.